I highly recommend getting a group of Vermont's greatest overachievers together and have them try to top each other, saying nice things about it. But fun and games are over. Now we're going to get down to some serious work. First I have to blame Martha App. Where's Martha? She's got to be here somewhere. She's hiding. You're all here on this lovely Saturday because of Martha Abbott, number one. She asked me to run in May, and for some reason, which I'll tell you about, although it's normally very easy to say no, for hundreds of reasons, there are always hundreds of great reasons not to run for anything like this. For some reason I didn't say no, and that has to do with the next two reasons. The next reason is healthcare reform. We have a governor who's committed to healthcare reform now. We, in this room, and many others, asked him to do that. He said he would do it, he followed through doing it, and he's still doing it. That's the second reason. The next reason is that we have a legislature with that leadership and others, Anthony, for example, that put together a law. And this law says some very, very good things. I'm going to quote from the very beginning of the law. Act 48. It is the intent of the General Assembly to create Green Mountain Care, to contain costs, and to provide as a public good, comprehensive, affordable, high-quality, publicly financed health care coverage for all Vermont residents in a seamless manner, regardless of income, assets, health status, or availability of other coverage. This was a victory for many people in this room. And as someone who's been at this a long time, in fact, I was digging through my files last night. We have analyses of single-payer health care on media we can't even read it. Floppy, you know what this is called? The next reason, and the last in this list, is that I blame our current Lieutenant Governor. Because in the process of trying to answer Martha's question, I made the mistake of looking at his website. I suggest you take a look at it. You'll want to run too. So on May 7th, with the okay from Cindy, my wife, more about which later, I said yes to Martha. And I said, if we're going to do this, we have to do it with public financing. The press has since asked me, did you run because they doubled the amount in the public financing? And I had to admit, I was entirely unaware of that. It turned out that by the time I decided, we had 38 days in which to qualify, something that even when we got Anthony qualified many years ago, more than 99, 2000, we hadn't come anywhere close to that kind of time frame. What really was a surprise is Martha and May and others put together this county-by-county coordinated effort throughout the state, and in 37 days, just one day short of the deadline, managed to do it. People actually remembered me, which was a huge surprise to me. So suddenly, it's June 12th, and money is not a problem in this campaign. We will have a competitive amount of money, $200,000. It sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot when you look at the fact that our opponent will probably spend considerably more than that. But that's the first thing that happened that means we can win this race. The second thing was a very gracious Democratic fellow named John Bauer, who had been trying to run, had been trying to qualify, truly believes in public financing as a means of letting the voters' voice really be heard in elections, otherwise known as democracy, decided that we deserved, because of that credibility of organization that many of the folks in this room did, that we deserved a one-on-one shot against the Republican incumbent. That's the second reason we have a really good shot at winning. That was quickly followed by the third reason, which is we were endorsed by the Democratic governor of the state of Vermont. And that is not something to be underestimated. Since that time, we many other elements that make this a winnable race. One is that I have talked, and I'll get into this a little bit more in a minute, I have talked to the state committee of the Democratic Party. They were incredibly welcoming and are willing, after the primary on August 26th, to not only allow me to have the nomination, but also to endorse me as a unity candidate for governor. It's something that we actually intend to that time, we've been going around the state, we've been going to various fairs and all sorts of events around the state, and I want to point out someone that I met, a Democrat who is going to be, is going to be one of the leaders of the legislature, Mike McCarthy from St. Albans, who greeted me warmly. Stand up. Warmly at the Franklin County Field Days and introduced me to everybody and invited us back to his kickoff in St. Albans, which was a great event. So thank you, Mike. I hope Mike is one of many, and he will help get all the support we need from our Democratic friends. Another thing we've done, fortunately, our opponent is whining about public financing and thinks it's a bad idea to take large private contributions out of our democratic process and let the voters pay for their own elections. So fortunately, he's complying with giving us a terrific issue that most Vermonters really believe in, and especially with what's going on at the Supreme Court saying that money is speech. Vermonters know that money is not speech, and that big money in elections is the opposite of democracy. So we've been able to hold some events. We held a press conference on public finance, calling for public financing for all state elections. And just think about this. For a measly $2 to $3 million per cycle, this particular race is 29 cents per Vermonter every 2 years. But for that kind of money, we can own our election completely. And then when we make a decision about financing health care that's $2 billion, we will have owned a democracy to make that decision. It's the greatest bargain there is. So, with public financing, our goal is to not bash anyone else, but to show that it can be done, to show that you can win with public financing if you have a good grassroots campaign and adequate money to get your message out. You can compete with any amount of money that the big money folks raise. And that's our goal, to show that it can be done. To do that, we have to win this election. More things have come our way. Just recently, the largest labor union in the state has endorsed us, taking that endorsement away from the incumbent. And that's the Vermont NEA, for which we're arguing. We expect many more of those to come as they play out in the next couple of months. Now, and one huge issue that's kind of intangible but very meaniful in this election cycle is that it happens to be the most interesting race in the entire state. Try as anyone might, the media cannot make a race out of the gubernatorial race. Some of you know my background. Some of it, I had no idea how great it was. I'll mention a few things. I went to school at Middlebury. I studied philosophy there and physics. It was the physics, believe it or not, that was the most useful as far as a job. As an electronics engineer by day in New York City and studied dance by night, something else I picked up at Middlebury. I became a research scientist after getting my master's in 1980 at NYU, and did research in many areas of renewable energy in particular, and some conventional power too. But that's obviously, that was our focus, and we had an atmospheric side, and we had a renewable energy side, essentially. And the two together really formed a conjunction for me of what we're going to do to avoid what we now call global warming. When I came back to Burlington, I was appointed to the Burlington Electric Commission. There we were able to put into place some of the things we've been talking about in terms of investing in efficiency, investing in local labor to get that efficiency instead of sending money out of the state to buy power, generally dirty power. Those things have made stable the electric bills in Burlington and have allowed us to grow the economy without growing our electric consumption and lower our carbon footprint and many other footprints in terms of environmental impacts in the city of Burlington. We shut down Vermont Yankee in 2002. In 1992, we made that decision. In 2002, it came to pass. We ended up saving money, the lights stayed on, and we tried to be a model for the state. That took another dozen years, and ultimately the decision of Entergy itself in order to do that. But it just shows that those kind of things can be done. We just bought, the voters in Burlington just bought something that we had set up way back then in the early 90s, a 7-megawatt power plant on the Winooski River that's environmentally responsible, and we put in an option to buy now, and the voters just did it right off the bat, and we now have another big chunk of renewable power that is sustainable for our electric supply in Burlington. The state could do that too. The state could have done that with the Deerfield River network. We lost that opportunity. We've lost a lot of opportunities in the state of Vermont. We lost an opportunity to buy Churchill Falls power at 1/4 cent per kilowatt hour for 25 years. We thought, why would we want to do that when we can build Vermont Yankee? We lost by 1 vote. So if you think that your voting doesn't matter who represents you in this House, in the 60s, that 1 vote caused Yankee to happen instead of a cost-effective power contract that would have helped economic development, put the state of Vermont on a slightly different, much better trajectory than we were on thanks to Vermont Yankee. Now, I also worked for Bernie Sanders. After I left the legislature, you've heard way too much about what I did in the legislature. I worked for Bernie Sanders for 2 years as his outreach director in Vermont. Got to see a lot of more corners of Vermont than I had seen in the legislature, and a lot of federal issues and the interaction with the state issues. And then I went to work with Verdant Power that had been set up back in 2000 to pursue kinetic hydropower underwater, essentially like underwater wind turbines, to collect power from rivers, currents, and ultimately the ocean currents. But with those jobs and jobs in electronics and jobs in other areas, formal and informal, that I've been involved in, I have to say that the job I loved the most and broke my heart most to leave was being in the legislature in this building. Now, we have incredibly exciting times in the state of Vermont. We have a confidence, we've accomplished a lot of things in the legislature, and people are behind them. We have a really positive can-do attitude with healthcare reform and GMO labeling and minimum wage increases. Not enough, not a living wage yet, and we're going to keep pushing on that. We're not going to say, oh, well, we're on that path for 4 years, let it play out, we can relax. We cannot relax. And these are the kind of issues that we care about, Vermonters care about primarily, and these are the common ground of the Democratic and progressive parties that we can work on together as part of this campaign. We have, at the same time, incredible challenges ahead of us with climate change and with actually getting the health care reform done. And that's what we really have to focus on. We have to meet these challenges head on, not just wait for them to roll over us in the case of climate change. We have to seize opportunities to use these to build our economy rather than to be swallowed up by it. There's some wonderful authors recently who are writing great information about this. And to do the health care, we are in this unusual situation where we have one statewide officer of general policy importance who is dragging his feet, who is not working to get this thing done. It is much easier to undermine by not doing anything, by spreading fear and uncertainty, than to actually say we have to do this. Our economy depends on it, our small businesses depend on it, our employees, our people of Vermont depend on this. We can't keep going. You know, when I was in here, we were worried about getting up to total spending on health care of $1.5 billion. We're now spending over $5 billion a a year on health care. How long do you think we can do that for? We can't. We simply can't. So it's not, oh, I'm not sure, I'm skeptical about single payer, we'll see how it works out. It's not going to work out by itself. We have to make it work out. We have to take our heads out of the sand, and we have to work hard and make it happen. And when it needs fixing, we need to fix it. And then the lieutenant governor can be the part of the process, as Anthony said, of going around the state and talking to people, gathering input, but also explaining a system that can be made to sound incredibly complicated, when in fact, at its core, as Deb said, it is extremely, extremely simple. Endless skepticism. You know, skepticism is great, but when it goes on forever, it's no more than foot dragging and fence sitting. And we can't have that. We can't afford that. Vermont has too few officers. Vermont can't afford that on the statewide level in the lieutenant governor's office. So climate change, the need for renewable energy, which is my field of work, is another challenge that we can lead the nation on. We cannot and do not need to lead the nation on everything. But on these two areas, healthcare and climate change, addressing it in a proactive way that's going to benefit our economy, these are things where we have to lead, and these are things where we are leading, and these are things where we will continue to lead. As everybody knows, and has been mentioned here before, and it's mentioned in almost every venue, our current lieutenant governor is a nice guy. I think so too. There was a time when that would have been good enough, a slower, less challenging time, but nice isn't enough anymore. If you want action on health care, if you want action on expanding local, sustainable, renewable energy and the jobs it brings to Vermonters, instead of being rolled over by global warming, nice is no longer good enough. Nice isn't enough if you want organized labor to have the right to organize. Nice isn't enough. In many of the other areas you've heard discussed today, but nice also isn't enough if you want a loved one to be able to make their own end-of-life choices. I have not only supported these areas, I have led in most of these areas. And as the NEA observed, I'm a really nice guy. So we have a very clear choice before us, and we have a very big task before us, so I'm asking for your support and your help. But no money. I'll give you a cautionary note. In the last 3 elections, Democrats have gone up against the Republican incumbents and have lost. And so clearly, I'm not, I may be a policy wonk, but I am not an elections geek, and I don't know all the reasons for this. But I do know that we're going to have to do something different this time than has been done in the last 3 times. And this is an off year. There are going to be a lot of people who don't vote. Young people, lower income people, the people who support us may not come out and vote unless we make it happen. And that's why the people who were in room 10 before, and the people who are in, and got us qualified, and the people who are in room 11 now, and all of the people that you enlist in this effort are going to make that difference. At this point in time, and we're going to put 2 parties together in this unity effort. Now, there have been times when that would have been a very difficult pitch to make, but I'm going to tell you that at this point in time, both of our parties can grow and succeed and represent Vermonters better than they do because we have opportunities to address these very challenging issues. It is also not a zero-sum game. We have seen great strides by the Progressive Party. We have also seen, and those of you who are progressives, you've got to admit it, some real advances on the part of the Democratic Party. And both of the parties can succeed both in numbers and in quality of policies, especially now that there is this opening due to the self-destruction of the Republican Party. Now, I said the same thing to the Democrats, and in case anybody's nostalgic for losing the last statewide Republican officer, Vermont cannot afford to be a museum for moribund political parties. had a whole different relationship with, that had a Dick Snelling, that had a George Aiken, that had a Jim Jeffords who was forced to leave it because it left him. That party is long gone. It does not exist. So, even though we have an exciting time where Vermont has made a lot of progress on a lot of fronts, as we've mentioned, we want more. We are not satisfied with where we are right at this point in time. Obviously not with the job half done on healthcare reform. So our two distinct and separate parties can work together in this race on these issues and get some of this done, far more important than many of the other things that we fight about here in this building. The happiest thing, without a doubt, that I learned while I was a legislator is that you can stick to your principles and have them guide you and have them show you the direction while still compromising with people, getting along with people, collaborating on solutions with many of the people here who don't automatically share your views from the start. And that involves work. So I'm happy to be in this position, although I do blame Martha Abbott. And I think Vermonters as a whole realize that we can have parties compete, or people compete, but also cooperate and get the job done for the state of Vermont. And that, what we might call the Vermont way, is something that Washington can learn from the state of Vermont. So we'll end up leading on that also. I'm finally going to sum up, not with more blame, but with thanks. I want to thank Cindy for letting me do this. My son Sid is also here. And of course this unbelievable team, each of whom does the work of 4, 5, 6 people. Meg, Martha, Chris, Terry, and Dave Sterrett, who couldn't be here today, he's at a wedding, also known as Mr. Single Payer. You can tell because it's on his license plate. Mostly, I want to thank those people. I want to thank everyone else who's here, not for coming out today, that's almost nothing, but all the incredible work that you're about. This is a great race, making it winnable. It will not be won unless you do that work, so you should feel very bad and if you want to blame somebody, you can go ahead and blame me. Because all we need for you to win is for you to work. Also, as a practical matter, August 26th primary, if you're voting on the progressive ballot, I'm printed right on there. If you're voting in the Democratic ballot, you just have to fill in the oval for write-in and write my name in. It's spelled here. Then I'm going to need you to talk, write letters to the editor, distribute materials, register voters, convince people, twist arms, enthuse, refer, give a ride, plant a lawn sign, and tweet. Now we're adding tweet. And enlist 5 other people to do exactly the same thing that you're doing and share the misery. There are no excuses. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Thank you very much.